My name is Roshni Sekel, and I will be facilitating today's university session. And our topic for today is standardized testing. And this is what we'll be diving a bit deeper into. This is certainly a topic that a lot of parents are quite curious about, seeing that it's an ever-changing realm, and there's always a lot of uncertainty around what to do next when it comes to standardized testing. So, the hope for today really is that we're going to unpack standardized testing, demystify a few of the things, and leave our parents and whoever's joining today a lot more comfortable when it comes to having the conversation about standardized testing with their children. So, just a quick background to who I am. Like I said, my name is Roshni Sekel, and I am from Johannesburg, South Africa. A quick educational background and a quick experience background for me is that I have a degree in international relations and public administration from the University of Pretoria. I have brief experience at the African Leadership Academy as a university guidance counselor. And through that experience, I really helped students from different walks of life, right? Not only students who need high financial aid, but students who also have to build up their English. So it was a very challenging experience that really helped me to specify and be very individualized when it comes to my teaching because I was able to help students from different backgrounds all together. But with that said, I think that's enough about me, and we can get straight into the topic for today. What we hope to walk through today are the six key points on my screen, which is why standardized tests still matter, the overview of the SAT, ACT, TOEFL, IELTS, Duolingo, and AP, the changing policies and digital formats within the standardized testing field, practical testing timelines that we suggest, decision frameworks for applicants. So, how should the students really weigh which test they should do or when they should do it? And then strategies to maximize success. So, today, we're going to be speaking about standardized testings on specifically for international applicants, right? This is a crucial area where many students and parents feel uncertain, especially with policies ever changing. Today, we're specifically going to cut through that noise. I'll walk you through the standardized testing, what it really means in today's ever changing realm, what stays the same, and most importantly, how you can strengthen your profile. Okay, so let's begin with the bigger picture. Over 80% of US colleges are now test optional or test blind, right? On the surface, this suggests that tests aren't really as important as they used to be. However, that's only a small portion of the story, right? Standardized tests provide common academic benchmarks across global systems. In addition to that, policy shifting, most colleges are now either test optional or test blind. And lastly, SAT is also now fully digital and adaptive. So, what does that mean? At selective universities such as MIT, Dartmouth, or even Georgetown, right? SAT/ACT requirements have come back. What that means is that standardized testing provide an objective benchmark across different school systems worldwide. So even at a test optional school, strong scores can offset a weaker transcript. So if you're from a school that's maybe grade inflating or deflating, even though you're performing well academically, it can affect your transcript. So, a strong SAT score can show your academic excellence and performance in addition to your physical transcript from your school. In addition to that, the standardized tests also demonstrate readiness for rigorous academics. So sometimes you may be in a school where the combination and subjects aren't seen as rigorous. Not to say that it's a pretty good school, but having a strong SAT score just shows that you take it a step further out of the classroom to show your rigorousness, to show how much you can take on in terms of your academic performance. In addition to that, it can also unlock your chances for financial aid or a scholarship. Most scholarships still require a standardized test, either the SAT or the ACT, even if they are a test blind or test optional school. There are certain scholarships and financial aid opportunities that still require you to do a standardized test. In addition to that, especially for international applicants, sometimes these can even waive English proficiency requirements. So if you perform well in the language components of certain SAT tests, you sort of waive away having to take an additional English requirement proficiency test to demonstrate that you can speak English well enough or you have been engaging with the language long enough. So while we can technically still apply to some schools without our SAT scores, our ACT scores, the real question here is should you? Now, the most common SAT or the most common standardized test that is known is the SAT and the ACT. Both are equally accepted, right? The SAT is now fully digital and adaptive, meaning that the test adjusts to the difficulty of your responses, right? In addition to that, it's about 2 hours and 15 minutes long and allows a calculator throughout the math part. The ACT, on the other hand, remains mostly paper-based, and it covers English, math, reading, and some sort of science portion as well. Plus, sometimes there's an additional essay. It's longer and nearly 3 hours and more fast paced. Strategically, the SAT is often better for students who like adaptive testing, shorter exams, and can use math with a calculator. If those are really your strengths or your best way of learning or even taking a test, then strategically the SAT is a better option for you. Whereas strategically for the ACT, many students who prefer straightforward questions, are quick readers, and like to include some sort of scientific reasoning are actually strong within that field, we would recommend the ACT. The best ways to decide which two to take is to take diagnostic tests for both and then commit. So not just off a whim, look at your strengths and say, I think I'll be good for this. But we always recommend extensive preparation, and both do offer some diagnostic tests that you can take before your official test taking. In addition, both are widely accepted, no preference. And again, the message that we're trying to get across here is for you really to choose the test that best match your strengths. When we decide again, choosing between the SAT or the ACT, as I've just covered, it's for assessing strong personal strengths. The SAT emphasizes reasoning skills, and the ACT focus on speed and science. So just based on what I've previously said, if you're the type of student that really leans more towards reasoning, quick math, shorter answers, and even having the ability to use a calculator, we'd highly recommend the SAT. But if you're more so on a speed and science focused, and this is your actual strength, and you're quite good in it, we recommend the ACT. But again, a word of caution, do both diagnostic tests to be certain about your decisions because we don't just make decisions on a whim. Again, the implications SAT has adaptive sections, emphasis on accuracy early in the test. A calculator is allowed throughout the math. And most importantly, you can practice with the Blue Book app for familiarity, meaning that you can test it out a few times before you commit to taking the actual test. Moving on to English proficiency tests. For international applicants, language proficiency is another key piece. The TOEFL and IELTS remain the two gold standards. But Duolingo English test has exploded in popularity due to its cost effectiveness, due to its fast pace in giving your results back, and it's affordable. It gives easy access to students across the world, right? Not really minimizing access to students who would need to get access to an English proficiency test. Even though the TOEFL and IELTS are the two gold standards, it is known that they can be quite expensive or pricey, in addition to still perhaps having to pay for application fees. Many schools waive these tests if you've studied English for several years, or, like I've said earlier on, if your SAT or ACT verbal scores are high. That makes your testing strategy interconnected, right? One strong score may save you another test. So that's why we say it's important we're making these decisions. It's not necessarily about affordability. It's not necessarily best of what's the easiest for me or how can I get my quickest highest score, but it's also a strategic tool that parents should use to offset extra things to do. So taking your SAT or your ACT very seriously can result in you not having to take an English proficiency test. And that one saves you more time and also the stress of having to worry about another component in the application. As we know, it's quite stressful, right? Moving on. There's something called AP exams, and this is advanced placement exams. They are different from advanced placement exams, but it's called AP exams. They are not required for admission, but they can show excellence and rigor, right? So a mastery of subjects beyond your school, what your school offers, and more so at a college level, right? Some universities will even credit you or give you advanced standing if you score well. So this is another strategy for you if you have space and time on your schedule, which we know many students don't. But if they really can take on this extra step on taking AP exams, one, it shows that you have an excellent performance when it comes to academics, but it further showcases your rigor as a student, right? And this, again, one of the highest rewards of this, varying by the university, can really offset and give you credits, meaning you're going into college with an even better standing and can even reduce your workload as is, because it shows that you are able to handle the caseload at a college level. A few key points are that AP exams are only offered once a year in May. They're only available if your school is an AP provider or you register at an approved center. So there are certain protocols that you need to follow to take on AP, but not to say that the options aren't there. So if your school is already an AP provider, that's excellent. However, if it's not, there's still the option of being able to register at a center that does provide the service. Using AP is a strategic tool to reinforce again your academic spikes. So, for example, if you do either physics or calculus, if you're applying for the STEM field, which is already an overpopulated and competitive field, so you need that extra edge, right? If you're able to take it on, if you're applying for the STEM world, you'd usually take something within calculus or physics as an AP to show that you're able to take it at that level. To be quite frank, now with how the admissions landscape is, being good in your academics and performing excellently does not give you the extra pizzazz or uniqueness that will make an admissions officer choose you above a different student. So, again, this is another strategic tool that you can use to give your profile that golden star that a lot of admissions officers are looking for. The bigger picture here. Even though, again, as I said at the beginning, over 80% of US four-year colleges are test optional or test blind, some selective schools are reinstating those requirements. So we don't want to remain ignorant to the idea that a lot of schools are optional because a lot of them are actually reversing that decision. They're seeing value in standardized testing. Grades and curriculum weigh more heavily now. So it's just not about how well your personal statement is or how well your activities are, but to prove that academic readiness and excellence is becoming very important. It's also always important to check individual program rules. Even though a school might be test optional, an individual program might need for you to take that standardized test. So it's always better for us to cross check and not just go off the assumption that a lot of schools are moving away from it or reinstating it. It's always better to do our own research to be extra certain, because I wouldn't want to be a student who's been performing very well throughout my high school years and has a really good profile, but misses the opportunity to either get even a merit-based scholarship, right? So not to say that it's financial aid based, but you could be given a merit aid scholarship because of how well you're performing, and doing well on a standardized test could increase your chances, or even when applying to a school and submitting your grades, if they do look at it, they automatically can even credit or offer you a merit scholarship. I just want to touch on a few key language or key theories that I touched on in the session just to make it a bit clearer, right? The three different types of terminologies that's used when it comes to standardized testing is test optional. So this is submit scores if you want, right? So this is submitting your scores if you'd like to. And then there's test blind. And test blind is scores are not considered even when submitting. So some schools are completely test blind. Even if you want to take that extra step to go ahead and submit your score, if they're test blind, it really doesn't make a difference because it's not considered. And then test required, right? This is still mandatory for some schools and programs, meaning you can't get away with the option of submitting or not submitting. If you're committing and applying to the specific school and it turns out they are test required, it means you will have to submit your scores. But again, as we've discussed in this particular session, that's not a bad thing at all. It could be really good for your portfolio. It could be that extra step or extra gold badge that you need on your portfolio to give you the edge to get admitted to a particular school. I now would like to walk you through the decision framework, right? So we've spoken about what a standardized test is, what the benefits are of a standardized test, how they're good for your profile, and what even the different variations of it is. But now the most important part of this session is a decision framework on which test you should take, right? So how do you decide? You ask yourself these following questions. Are your scores strong enough compared to the school's middle 50% range? If yes, submit. So are your scores strong enough compared to the school's middle 50% range? If yes, then submit. Are you applying for merit aid? Meaning, are you applying for a merit-based scholarship because you're doing so well academically? If yes, you'll most likely need scores. Are you targeting schools abroad, which most of you are because you're international applicants? So the UK, Canada, Singapore, many still weigh test scores heavily. If you're applying to such an institution, then go ahead and submit. Do you have a weaker transcript, right? And if the answer is yes, go ahead and submit. Having a weak transcript should not discourage you from showing an admissions officer that you still have that academic excellence and rigor. Most admissions officers know that we're also dealing with students who are 17, 18, and 19. We don't expect to have students who are fully made and understand and are perfect. No, they do understand that there might have been something happening in their personal life that could have caused a hiccup in their transcript. They may have switched cities. They may have had a health scare. All of these things happen because we are human. And that could sometimes result in you having a weaker transcript. But again, an SAT is an opportunity to prove to an admissions officer that even though you have a weak transcript, there is that academic excellence to you through scoring very high on a standardized test. A score can balance it out. And it can stand as evidence if one of your teachers even write in your recommendation letter that you're a strong student, but give context to why you have a weaker transcript. An SAT score can balance that out and show that there's a consistency in your story. Because in all honesty, most admissions officers are looking for a consistent story, not just one burst of excellence. Remember, not submitting scores is also a strategy, not a shortcut. So if you're thinking at the back of my mind, my child is not going to take the SAT because it's not required, that's a shortcut, not a strategy, right? Only skip it if your application is already strong, if you're certain that the school that you're going to doesn't require it, and if you're not looking for any sort of scholarship or financial aid, then that's a strategy. So the student can focus on other parts of their application, such as strengthening their personal statement, such as answering their supplemental essay questions. They now have more time to spend on that rather than focusing on preparing for the SAT. So the reminder here again is it is not a shortcut, but a strategy, right? So just follow along on the screen to just remind you what the decision framework is. Map your school's policy. So is it a required test? Is it an optional school or is it a blind test school? Assess your strength, right? So submitting your scores, you need to also assess how strong you've done in these tests. So the word of encouragement is not just to go ahead and submit because you've done it, but the hope is that you're going to do well, okay? So there is another element of SAT that a lot of parents aren't aware of, and that's that you can take the test multiple times, okay? So if you don't do well on your first try and you want to take it a second time, right? Obviously hoping that you're going to prepare a lot better this time, you have the option of selecting which score you want the school to see. So it's not automatic that they're just going to see the first score. There is an additional setting in your college board when you do want to send your scores that you can choose which score to send. And my advice would obviously be the stronger score. So this is another thing to look out for because perhaps you can make a mistake if you take more than one SAT and happen to submit both. So again, these are strategies and we need to be very careful from our end. And then the next step, factor in if it's a scholarship that you're applying for or if the program requires the score. Again, you don't want to be penalized for a little small error where you just forgot that it's important or you weren't certain. So, again, another important element when it comes to university guidance is thorough research so that we make informed decisions, not only decisions based off a whim or what's currently happening in the world space. Okay? And then lastly, what will add that extra uniqueness and gold star to your portfolio is to consider APs for credit where available. Again, this is super exceeding expectations as a student because you're going beyond your extracurricular activities. You're going beyond what you're doing in class. You may even be in the honors class at your school. And if you can still go ahead and take a shot to do the AP, that is certainly the excellence that will make you an outlier. But again, this is super exceeding expectations. I would not recommend it for every student. We don't want students to be burnt out when they apply for university. We also don't want students to jeopardize the work that they've done over the years. Remember, admissions officers don't only consider your SAT or your final scores. There's a story that they want to see. They want to see all your hard work throughout most of your high school, your entire academic performance, your entire activities list. So we don't want to push our students to a point where they need to now take something extra on the caseload that could jeopardize the hard work that they've been putting in over the years. So again, every step it should be a strategic choice and not just to put something on the list to make ourselves look better. We don't want to create a false impression and add unnecessary pressure on the students. We want to tell a very honest, hardworking application story that shows our growth and shows our consistency and excellence throughout the year. Because as I surely do believe, consistency is what makes excellence. And here's just a practical testing timeline from our side. 12 months before, right? So again, SAT is a strategy. You should be thinking about these things very early on. It's one of the foundations of a application, okay? So even 12 months before, we'd recommend you start off with researching school requirements. I highlighted this earlier on as well, where I said it's very important that the foundation is set through research. We don't want to make blind decisions or uninformed decisions. We want to be certain when making a choice. So, researching our school requirements is very important because that will give you your answer very early on, whether you should submit, whether you shouldn't submit, and what exactly you should be submitting. Okay. And then 12 to 15 months before, take the SAT or ACT or even schedule the TOEFL or IELTS, okay? There are different dates, right? Where every month, about every month, there is a date where you can sit down and take the SAT, right? So start to plan a schedule. Start to work it around what your school schedule looks like. Start to work it around what your extracurriculars look like so that you can start preparing in advance. So you have a schedule, right? The preparation is as important as taking the test. Therefore, this is such a hack, if I may say, because you're able to prepare for it in advance. It's not a blind test that you take. So we're going to be very certain that we can schedule along our current standing in our life for the student as well as the parents. So there's an understanding from both sides, right? And then 9 to 11 months before, you can retake if needed. Okay, that's the strategy for starting early. Like I said, we don't want to be a few months before we need to submit our application and we're taking 3 to 4 tests in a row. That's again unnecessary additional stress on the student. But if you plan it and if you don't do well, which is a reality, it's not a discouragement. If we have enough time, we can re-prepare, re-strategize, and take it again. Right? Again, these are students. We understand that things happen, life happens, but it's not an opportunity to penalize yourself, but use it as a learning strategy to continue again. And then a note here for anyone who's interested in the AP exams. They happen in May. So again, your timeline needs to be planned around that. And in your application year, submit your official scores on time, right? Again, if you can do all of this just slightly before your application year, you have time to focus on other parts of the application. You have time to develop the essays you want to write. You have time to form relationship with your teachers so they can write strong recommendation letters for you. And then this is not viewed as a scramble or a rush to finish, but rather as a preparation strategy tool for us to do even more to get possibly admitted to our dream institution. A few prep strategies that work, right? So you can take diagnostic tests for either the SAT or the ACT to compare fit. You can use official practice tools for digital SAT and TOEFL. So some of these sites straight on their websites where you can register, they offer test applications or they offer certain software that you can download, such as Blue Book, to prepare yourself through doing test runs. And these are highly recommended. There are also ample free resources that you can use. So if you don't have access to maybe a tutor for SAT classes, that should not discourage you. There are so many official practice tools that you can use independently, right, to try and help yourself prepare for an SAT. And then there should be a 6 to 8 week focus prep cycles on weak areas. So let's again be strategic about how we're preparing for these standardized tests. The reason why we encourage practice runs is because you're officially able to tell where your gap and weak areas are, right? So it's not to take the test to try and show the test that you're good enough. No, it's about being strategic about where I'm weak, where I'm strong, what exactly should I focus on to save time. The goal here is to work smarter and not harder, right? For AP, review past free response and practice exams. Again, I would expect a student who really takes their schooling and education career very seriously to know how to do excellent research as well. So I would expect them to be able to go through free past response papers. Again, we should not limit ourselves to resources. There are ample free resources and official sites that really do allow for access to students who aren't as privileged or able to access these resources. Again, should I take the SAT if my school is test optional? Yes, because again, this could make your profile even stronger. This could be the one factor between two students that are maybe on the wait list but have a very similar profile. And they can have a look at your application and see that you included your SAT score and that it's quite high. And that could just be the deciding factor that gets you off that wait list and admitted. Because the admissions field currently is that even if you have a perfect portfolio, even if you're a straight A student or have an excellent academic profile, you might not get admitted. We need to do things outside of just what we learn at school and our extracurriculars to give us that excellent mark to ensure that we still have a higher chance when running the race. Okay? Do high AP scores guarantee credit at your university or college? No, because credit policies vary. Okay, schools are very different to how they run their departments or programs or how they give certain credits to their students. So it's very important for us to do our research. Okay. So even before we even look at our standardized testing, just a small tip here, I would rather start with our research to be certain that we are doing the right thing and not wasting precious time. Okay. And then what English test is best? We would again recommend the two because there are two golden standards, which is the TOEFL and the IELTS. But Duolingo is really growing. It has that sort of credibility to it. So do your research again. But a lot of institutions are accepting Duolingo, right? Because of how much access it gives to international students and students across the world. And a lot of students are opting for Duolingo because of the cost effectiveness to it and because it really did allow access for a lot of marginalized communities as a whole. Action checklist for the next 30 days. So we don't just want to overwhelm you with a bunch of information that you probably could have read somewhere else, right? We also want to be quite strategic in how we're presenting our session to you. So we're going to give you a small checklist that you can either jot down as inspiration for when planning with your child or with anyone that you'd like to help through their college application, and give them this as inspiration to have a more structured approach. It's not always about the best or most expensive, but the more structured and clear your approach is, that could even sometimes assist you to getting to your final goal. So the first step, make a spreadsheet of targeted schools and test policies, right? The more organized and clear we are of what the requirements are, the more we can focus our efforts to what exactly we need to do. So have a simple spreadsheet, nothing fancy. It doesn't have to have a lot of formulas, just the list of the targeted schools, and then do your research of their test policies. Are they test required, test optional, or test blind? Again, this is strategy. This could save you a lot of time or it could give you direction almost instantaneously. And then take the diagnostic SAT or ASAT to see which one you enjoy more and which one you fare well in. Not only based on feeling, but based on your strengths, how you're performing at school, and again, what type of learner are you? Are you more in a logical and reasoning or more short and scientific reasoning? Okay. Then schedule the TOEFL or IELTS if required. Again, not every student will require to take English proficiency, maybe because of the number of years that they've been in the school or have been speaking English or have been receiving education in English, or also something as simple as the type of passport that they do hold, right? And that could really save you time from not taking the English proficiency test. So it's also very important to be clear on that. And then explore AP credit policies if you're able to. Okay, this is a point for honest self-reflection, and where we, as the parent or as the adult, need to take accountability and say, is this the best strategy for my child? If you know they're able to cope with the rigor, if you know that they will outperform and supersede expectation, do not hold them back. But again, we don't want to do anything out of wanting to get admitted to jeopardize the hard work that has been put in over the years. It's just not one year that they look at, but a consistent story throughout. And then create a focused prep plan after doing your research, after scheduling your test, right? How am I going to get to the best score? It's not as simple as just sitting down and doing it, right? Take trial tests, get resources. Some are free. Join a tutor session if you can for SAT classes. But the prep plan is what's important. So we know where our strengths lie, where our weaknesses lie, and what we should do to get better. And this is sort of a small, quick checklist that we suggest that you can even implement within the next 30 days to give you a more structured approach to your standardized testing decision. Resources and further reading, right? So there's Fair Test, which is a test optional tracker. There's College Board, which is the official site for SAT and AP resources. There's ETS TOEFL website, which gives score guides and prep. And then there's NACAC. And NACAC really is an admissions trend research website, okay? So besides knowing what the student needs to do, I think it's also very important for the parents to know what these admissions officers are thinking, right? So there's nothing mysterious about it. There is websites where you can go and look up what the current trends are, what admissions officers recommend. There's sometimes even SAT resources or demystifying questions that you might have answered directly by people who are in these fields. And these are just a few of the resources we recommend from our end. And just to round off and get to the conclusion, tests are tools, not hurdles. These are a strategic tool that we can use. So again, saying no and deciding very early in your application journey not to take an SAT should not be a shortcut. It should be an informed strategic decision. The same for when you agree to take it. It's a strategic tool to give you that academic excellence and competitive edge that another student might not have. And that's again just the reality of admission trends. A lot of international communities are growing within universities, so the likelihood of someone having a very similar profile to you, a similar story to you, as well as a similar academic track record, is not as far-fetched, right? So we need to do these extra things to ensure that we have tools that make us stand out. So plan early, choose strategically, and use tests to highlight strengths. It's another moment for us to show how we can be the outlier and go beyond just being another common applicant. At this point, I've reached the end. If there are no questions, I have a list of questions that I have compiled that you could ask based on the session, and I also have the answers. So if I don't have any questions, I am more than comfortable with hopping right into the question and answers that I've created.
We do have one question. It's
Okay.
if a student takes SAT multiple times and only submit the best score, will universities know about the other scores?
No. So, because like I said earlier on, you're able to choose, right? So within your dashboard on College Board, you click that the universities will only see that specific test. The universities are not able to see the other tests if you do not submit it, so they will not even be aware of it. Okay? But if you do make the mistake of submitting all tests, then they will know. So you need to be very careful when going through your College Board dashboard to submit that one specific test and not the rest. Okay. But if you are not familiar with College Board, College Board is very good at guiding new users. So there are resources on their websites that answer these type of questions to help you get the right settings and to be certain that you're not making a mistake. If that's the only question, I am just going to go ahead and look at the questions that I've written down and read them out and just also respond. Okay? So, question one, should I take both the SAT and ACT? My answer would be not necessarily. Take diagnostics for both, then commit to the one that matches your strengths. Preparing for both is usually insufficient unless you have ample time, which in reality we know our students don't have that much time. Question two, will not submitting scores hurt my chances? My answer is if your scores are below the school's average, not submitting can help. But if your scores are at or above the middle 50% range, submitting usually strengthens your application. It's about strategy. So, again, our hope is to score very well. Certain schools are quite particular and will not accept a SAT score or a certain standardized test score that's below their average. So, if you did the SAT score and you've done it multiple times and your best effort is below what's required from the school and the school is test optional, then I will go ahead and not submit. Again, it's a strategy to ensure that you do not disadvantage yourself. Question number three. Is Duolingo English test really accepted at top schools? Yes. Schools such as Columbia, Stanford, Yale, and many others accept it. However, some schools still prefer the TOEFL or IELTS, so always check your school list, right? It's very important for us to remember to do the research to be certain and not jeopardize our chances unnecessarily. Question four. Are AP exams worth it if my school still doesn't offer them? Like I said earlier on, sometimes your school doesn't offer it, so you need to register with a center that provides them, right? They're not required. Focus first on strong academics and extracurriculars, things that are within your control. If you can access APs, if you have the ability to take on the extra load and do well, they will add value, but they're not a deal breaker. Like I said, you would be super exceeding expectations. And again, I would not recommend you jeopardize the work you've put in over the years to maintain a good academic record or portfolio because you are too focused on your AP exams and you let the other parts of your portfolio underperform. Okay? Question five. Should I retake the SAT or ACT? Yes. If you're within striking distance of your targeted school's average, most students improve by even 50 to 100 points on the SAT or 1 to 2 points on the ACT on a second attempt, right? That's why we recommend doing trial tests. Even though it's not the exact test, it gives you the practice that you need. Because what you may find is that maybe you didn't perform so well at your first try, not because you didn't know how to do the content or answer the questions, but because the style of the test might have been your first time doing it. And you might have been unfamiliar, and not knowing might cause that extra anxiety or nerves to overperform, which again, in reality, we're working with students, humans, not objects. So all of these factors are quite possible. So the more prepared you are, the more relaxed you are, the more certain and familiar you are about the style. Do UK or Canadian schools care about SAT or ACT? Yes, many do. The UK schools often requires APs or A-level equivalents, but SAT/ACT can still strengthen an application. So be certain to what institution you're applying to. Canadian schools often consider test scores, especially for scholarships, right? So even though your school themselves might not consider the standardized test important or optional, if you're applying for a scholarship, sometimes it is required for you to do the standardized tests. And then question seven, the last one. How do I know if my test prep is working? Track practice scores under timed conditions so you know if you're taking it fast enough or if you're taking it slow enough, or it will also help you see where you struggle the most. If your official test scores match your practice range consistently, you're ready. If not, adjust your prep cycle. Again, another small tip. If your SAT is scheduled and you don't feel ready enough, you're able to reschedule it to a later date. But again, this shouldn't just be done because of last minute jitter or nerves. Be strategic and honest with yourself. A pillar that I really believe when teaching is honest self reflection. So if you're seeing within your practice scores that you're not doing too well, you can go back and change the date to a possible later date that could allow you more time to prepare. But again, remember, the SAT is not the only thing happening in your life. You need to be certain that you're not doing exams at school, that it's not a busy season at school, or you're playing a big tournament or league. So again, the more prepared we are, the more we're able to take and make informed decisions that could really help us to build a strong foundation for our college applications. And that brings me to the end of what I need to share. I
I
really
still have
hope
one
today was
question. Sorry
informative.
to interrupt.
Okay.
Tonight is on fire. So besides standardized testing, essay is also very important. And what other major components should we be aware of or submit? Can we submit a video along with the essay or even instead of it? This is a question.
Okay. Absolutely. So, what I gather what the question is asking is other than standardized tests, what is important for a college application, as well as how important the essay is, if I'm correct, right? So, other than the SAT is an addition. The important components of an application is your transcript, so your school, your grades, right? So the physical transcript of how you've been performing over the years. The next thing is your personal statement. Your personal statement is the only opportunity on the application that a student is able to share their voice, right? So either if they want to share stories on values or a life-changing experience or moment that they really think the admissions officer should know, this is their only opportunity to actually show their true voice, how they think and what are their thoughts. And it's super important because this sets you apart. It's your unique voice speaking to the admissions officer directly. This is also very important because on average, your application is read between 8 to 12 minutes. Right? Meaning that's not a whole lot of time to get through hundreds of students. Okay. So the personal statement is the first thing that captures the admissions officer's attention and to an extent can also make you memorable. So it's an opportunity for you to create a long lasting impression that's unique. Then next, you have your activities list. Your activities list is a compilation of the different types of extracurricular activities that you've been doing, right? So, what you've been doing, such as after school clubs, such as sports, such as public speaking or debating. But the important thing about an activities list is not just the list of things you've done, but rather the impact that you've had in this particular sport or activity. So, the number of years and how you've contributed. So, instead of saying that I was a speaker or a debater in Model UN for 3 years, you can say that I was a speaker at a conference that had about 15 speakers. I was chosen to represent 15 schools, and my contribution was that I headed the research team to ensure that my class or teammates would have the best talking points. That shows your active role. So that's also a very key important role. Then you have your supplemental essays, so additional essays that certain schools have. So not just your personal statements. Sometimes schools will ask other questions, such as why you're a good fit for our school, or can you speak about a specific value, where they want to find out a bit more about you other than your personal statement, and it's quite specific to the requirements of that school. Another important component is the why major essay. So if you choose and commit to a specific major, they will ask of you, why do you want to go into chemical engineering, right? And you need to write sort of an academic essay that proves your interests within this particular field. So, what have you done to demonstrate your interests? Why is this of interest to you? So, it's not a story. It's not to be flowery and convince an admissions officer about your life story, but it's particularly focused on the major that you're going into. And that's where a passion project or a research project becomes very important to show your demonstrated interest in a particular field beyond the classroom. And those are some of the key components of an application that really work together to give a strong application. And that's why I also mentioned earlier on, it's good to have a consistent story throughout. And another thing that I forgot, my apologies, is the teacher recommendation letters, right? So schools require recommendation letters from your teachers to give a point of reference of who the student is, how they how they learn, and also how they've grown over the years, how the teacher views them. And it's really the opportunity for the teacher to give a personal touch to your recommendation, right? So it's very important because at the end of every recommendation letter, it's signed off by I would highly recommend the student. So you have your teacher recommendation letter and your counselor recommendation letter, which weighs even more because that's more of a personalized relationship between the student and the university guidance counselor, right? And that is an opportunity for the counselor to also recommend the students and give them the extra touch on their portfolio. And those are the main components. Very scrambled. I'm very sorry that I had a mouthful to say, but that's the best I could list it out for you.
And in terms of storytelling, what if instead of essay we submit the video or submit a video alongside the essay? Would that be allowed?
It depends on the school. So for the personal statement, no, it is just an essay. But if you're applying to more so of an arts program, sometimes you need to submit a portfolio, and in the portfolio, there's sometimes an opportunity for you to submit a video. So sometimes the requirements for different institutions vary, and for their own personal portal, if they do have one, maybe there is an option. But in most cases, it is essay based. Your personal statement is a written essay. Your Y major essay is a written essay.
That would be all from our side.
Thank you so much.